The storm named Hope barreled onto the East Coast with an unrelenting ferocity, its destructive power carving a path of chaos and despair. Winds roared like angry beasts, tearing roofs from homes and hurling trees across streets as if they were mere twigs. The relentless rain poured down in sheets, turning once busy neighborhoods into rivers of swirling, debris-filled water. Within moments, homes that had stood for decades crumbled into piles of rubble, and the comforting warmth of family life was replaced by the cold, stark reality of loss. Among the countless lives upended was that of Sam, a boy just 9 years old, swept into the heart of the storm's tragedy. His small family home, once a place of safety and love, was no match for the raging floodwaters. That night, Sam lost everything: his parents, his home, and the only world he had ever known. The flood carried away not just his possessions, but also his sense of security and belonging. Sam didn't cry, not because he was brave, but because he was too shocked, too frozen with fear to summon tears. His small, trembling frame was wrapped in a tattered jacket that did little to protect him from the biting chill. On his feet were worn-out sandals that squelched with every step as he trudged through the cold, murky waters of the flooded streets. The city, once alive with the hum of daily life, had become a landscape of eerie silence, punctuated only by the occasional wail of a distant siren or the muffled cries of others who had also lost their loved ones. For hours, Sam wandered aimlessly, clutching a small, soaked bundle of what few belongings he had managed to grab before the water claimed the rest. His breaths came in shallow gasps as the cold seeped into his bones. He didn't know where he was going. He just kept walking, driven by the faint instinct to survive. Eventually, he stumbled upon a temporary shelter, a makeshift refuge hastily set up to house the growing number of displaced families. The scene inside was one of organized chaos. Volunteers bustled about, setting up cots and distributing blankets, while families huddled together, their faces etched with exhaustion and grief. The air was thick with the acrid smell of wet clothes, damp earth, and despair. Sam slipped inside, unnoticed amidst the flurry of activity. The shelter was overcrowded, with every corner filled by those seeking solace from the storm. People lined up for warm meals, while others wrapped themselves in whatever dry blankets they could find. But in the middle of this hive of frantic energy, Sam was still. He curled up in a shadowy corner, as quiet as a ghost, pulling his knees to his chest as if to shield himself from the world around him. His eyes, wide and haunted, stared into the distance. They didn't seek comfort or answers. They were blank, a reflection of the void left by the storm. He didn't reach out to anyone, didn't ask for food or warmth. It wasn't because he didn't need them, but because he had forgotten how to hope. The storm hadn't just taken away his family and home. It had stolen his sense of what the future could hold. As the night wore on, the shelter buzzed with the murmurs of despair and whispered prayers. But Sam remained silent, a solitary figure amid the crowd. Around him, the world moved on, trying to piece together fragments of broken lives. Yet Sam seemed stuck, as if time had abandoned him entirely. He was just a child, lost in a sea of strangers, in a world that no longer felt like his own. The devastating storm that ravaged the East Coast didn't just leave behind a trail of destruction. It sparked a wave of attention that swept across the entire nation. The images of broken homes, flooded streets, and displaced families filled television screens and front pages, touching the hearts of millions. From ordinary citizens to influential leaders, everyone felt the weight of the tragedy. Among them was Donald Trump, a figure known as much for his fame and power as for his polarizing nature. Yet this time, his decision to act wasn't about politics or publicity. He resolved to visit one of the shelters personally, not for cameras, But to witness the devastation with his own eyes and to understand how he could help, it was a bitterly cold afternoon, the kind of chill that seemed to seep into every bone. Gray clouds hung low in the sky, casting a somber shadow over the temporary shelter, where hundreds of displaced families sought refuge. The sound of Trump's motorcade approaching drew attention even before it arrived. As the sleek black cars rolled to a stop, all eyes turned toward the convoy. For many in the shelter, his arrival was a distraction from their sorrow, a momentary flicker of something different, perhaps even a faint glimmer of hope. When Trump stepped out of the car, his commanding presence was immediately palpable. Dressed sharply despite the dreary weather, he exuded confidence, but there was a softness in his expression that wasn't often seen. The crowd of shelter occupants, who had grown accustomed to hopelessness in the past few days, turned to him with tired, worn-out eyes. Some stared blankly, while others watched with cautious curiosity. Slowly, some faces began to shift, as though daring to believe that his presence might signal some sort of miracle. The shelter was a chaotic mix of makeshift seating, temporary tents, and clusters of people huddled together for warmth. Volunteers darted back and forth, carrying trays of food, blankets, and other essentials. Trump walked purposefully into the heart of the activity, his presence drawing whispers and stares. Yet he didn't stop for the cameras or the reporters trailing behind him. Instead, he paused to talk with families, leaning in to listen as they recounted their stories of heartbreak and loss. One woman described how the storm had ripped the roof off her home, leaving her family with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Another man choked back tears as he spoke of his wife, who had been swept away by the floodwaters. Trump's usual confidence seemed to waver as he listened. He had witnessed crises before, but the sheer scale of suffering in this place hit him deeply. He nodded solemnly, offering words of encouragement and promises to help, but his face betrayed his struggle to fully absorb the weight of what these people had endured. As Trump continued through the shelter, his gaze eventually fell on a small figure in the corner of the room. Amid the sea of people and the constant buzz of activity, this boy seemed almost invisible. Huddled beneath a thin, worn blanket, the child sat alone, his knees pulled up to his chest. His frame was so small, so fragile, that he looked like he might vanish if someone didn't acknowledge him. Something about the boy stopped Trump in his tracks. The lively chaos of the shelter seemed to fade away as he focused on this solitary child. The boy wasn't watching him like everyone else. He wasn't looking at him with awe or expectation. Instead, his eyes, dull and lifeless, stared at the floor. They held no curiosity, no spark of hope, only a deep, quiet doubt, as if he had already decided that no one, not even someone as powerful as Donald Trump, could possibly change his circumstances. For a moment, Trump just stood there, observing the boy in silence. There was something profoundly unsettling about the scene. Among the noise, the movement, the raw emotion swirling around the shelter, this child was like a tiny, forgotten shadow, a dot of stillness in the middle of chaos. Then, without hesitation, Trump moved toward the boy. Those nearby noticed and fell silent, their conversations and movements halting as they watched the powerful man approach. Whispers rippled through the room, but no one dared to speak loudly. They all seemed to hold their breath, captivated by the sight of this towering, influential figure walking toward a child who appeared as though he had been abandoned by the entire world. Trump crouched down, his imposing frame lowering itself to the boy's level. He spoke softly, his voice stripped of its usual bravado. At that moment, he wasn't a businessman, a public figure, or a politician. He was just a man reaching out to a child who had been swallowed by loss. Around them, the room seemed to grow quieter, as though everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Donald Trump, a man known for his commanding presence and unwavering confidence, approached Sam with an uncharacteristic softness. He knelt down beside the boy, lowering himself until their eyes were level. For a moment, the chaos of the shelter seemed to fade into the background. His voice, typically powerful and assertive, carried a gentleness that wasn't often heard. "Hello, son," he said, his tone warm and inviting. "Are you okay? What's your name?" Sam, clutching a thin, tattered blanket tightly around his small frame, didn't answer right away. Slowly, he lifted his head, his eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and guarded by an almost palpable wariness, met Trump's. They weren't the eyes of a child accustomed to kindness or attention. Instead, they reflected a lifetime of pain compressed into just a few days of unimaginable loss. When Sam finally spoke, his voice was so faint that Trump instinctively leaned in closer to hear him. "I'm Sam," he whispered, his words almost lost in the noise of the shelter. "But I don't know where to go anymore." Those words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Trump's usually unshakable composure faltered for a brief moment as the boy's simple statement hit him with the force of its raw truth. He nodded slowly, as if to acknowledge the depth of Sam's pain, and then spoke with a reassuring calm. "Don't worry, Sam," he said, his voice steady. "Someone will help you. I'm here to listen. What do you need most right now?" Sam didn't answer immediately. He sat in silence, staring at the floor as though lost in thought. The shelter buzzed faintly around them, volunteers handing out food, families murmuring softly. But within this moment, it felt like time had stopped. Trump waited patiently, his gaze never leaving the boy. Finally, Sam looked up. His eyes, though glistening, held no tears. They were filled not with hope, but with a kind of resigned acceptance, as though he had long since given up on expecting anything from the world. When he spoke, his voice was soft but sharp, each word cutting through the room like a blade. "I don't need anything," he said, pausing briefly before continuing. "I just want to ask you one thing. If I don't have a home here, do you think there's a place for me in heaven?" The question landed like a thunderclap in the quiet room. Conversations stopped. The sounds of shuffling feet and rustling blankets ceased. Everyone nearby, from volunteers to shelter residents, turned their attention toward the small boy and the powerful man kneeling before him. It was as though the entire space had collectively drawn in a breath and held it, waiting. Trump, who had faced countless challenges, conflicts, and crises in his lifetime, found himself momentarily disarmed. This wasn't a question of policy or strategy. It wasn't something that could be answered with statistics or promises of resources. It was a question from the heart of a child, a simple, pure inquiry that carried with it all the weight of his loss, his fear, and his longing. He looked into Sam's eyes, searching for the right words. Those eyes, wide and sorrowful, didn't just ask the question. They begged for an answer, for assurance, for something to cling to in a world that had been ripped apart. After a long pause, Trump placed a steady hand on the boy's small shoulder. His voice, when it came, was firm yet filled with an unexpected tenderness. "Sam," he began, his tone unwavering but deeply compassionate. "You don't just have a place in heaven. Heaven is made for souls as pure and strong as yours. But I promise you this, we'll do everything we can so that you won't have to think about heaven too soon. There's a place for you here in this world. Right now, this will be your home, and I will help you find it." Sam didn't move at first. His small frame remained still, as though he was trying to process the enormity of what he had just heard. It was clear that such words, words of assurance, belonging, and care, were foreign to him. For a child who had been thrust into unimaginable despair, the promise seemed almost too good to be true. Around them, The shelter remained silent. A cold breeze drifted through the room, brushing against the gathered crowd. Yet somehow the air felt warmer. Faces softened. Tears welled up in the eyes of those who had heard Sam's question and Trump's answer. In that moment, it was as if hope, fragile but undeniable, had sparked anew in the hearts of everyone present. Though no one spoke, the atmosphere had shifted. People looked at each other with a quiet understanding, as though Sam's words and Trump's promise had reminded them of something fundamental, that even in the darkest moments, the light of compassion and humanity could shine through. Donald Trump's emotional visit to the disaster-stricken area wasn't just a moment of reflection. It became a catalyst for a powerful movement. Among the rubble and despair, he encountered Sam, a young boy whose innocent yet haunting question pierced through the chaos. "Does heaven have a place for me?" The words lingered in Trump's mind long after he left the scene. Sam's wide, searching eyes and the sheer vulnerability in his voice became a rallying cry in Trump's heart. It was a question that demanded more than sympathy. It demanded action. Upon his return, Trump wasted no time. He convened a high-level meeting at one of his offices, bringing together an eclectic group of business leaders, nonprofit organizations, policymakers, and influencers. Standing at the head of the room, surrounded by photos of the devastation he had just witnessed, Trump recounted Sam's story. His voice wavered with raw emotion, breaking through his usual commanding tone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I met a boy named Sam. He asked me something that no child should ever have to ask. Does heaven have a place for me?" Those words, they're burned into my memory. And let me tell you, we can't comfort children like Sam with empty promises or political talking points. Words won't build them homes. Words won't give them hope. Words won't tell them they matter in this world. It's on us, every single one of us, to show them they're not forgotten. This is our moral obligation, not just as leaders, but as human beings. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone present. Then, with the resolute energy he was known for, Trump pivoted from sentiment to action. "This is what we're going to do," he declared, his voice firm. "We're launching a campaign, something big, something bold. We're calling it A Place for Me. It's inspired by Sam and every child like him who's been left wondering if there's still a place for them in this world. And it's going to change lives." Through the campaign A Place for Me, Sam's story evolved into a beacon of hope, resonating deeply across the nation. The image of a small boy, standing amid the devastation, asking a question that encapsulated so much pain and innocence, "Does heaven have a place for me?" captured the hearts of millions. His story was no longer just one of loss. It became a powerful symbol of resilience and transformation, rallying people from all walks of life to take action. Sam's life took a dramatic turn because of the campaign's efforts. Among the many families who stepped forward to adopt or foster children in need was a couple who had faced their own unimaginable heartbreak. John and Linda had lost their only child in a tragic car accident 2 years prior. Their home had grown painfully quiet, their hearts heavy with a grief that time alone couldn't heal. When they saw Sam's story on the news, something stirred within them. "He reminds me of our son," Linda had said softly as they sat together one evening. "But it's more than that. John, he needs us. And maybe we need him too." John, hesitant at first, looked at the picture of Sam on the screen, the boy's wide, tear-filled eyes, so full of longing. It was as if fate was nudging them forward, offering them a chance to transform their pain into purpose. The adoption process moved quickly, spurred by the campaign's focus on matching children with families who could provide immediate love and stability. When John and Linda met Sam for the first time, it was as though the boy instinctively knew they were meant to be his family. Though shy and reserved, he allowed Linda to hold his hand, a small but significant gesture for a child who had endured so much loss. Life changed for all three of them. The couple didn't just offer Sam a roof over his head. They gave him what he had been yearning for, a sense of belonging. They transformed their spare bedroom into a warm, cheerful space filled with books, toys, and a soft bed covered in blankets that Sam picked out himself. Slowly but surely, the walls of mistrust Sam had built around himself began to crumble. Sam's transformation was gradual but remarkable. At first, he would wake up in the middle of the night, crying quietly, afraid that everything he had now could be taken away just as suddenly as it had come. John and Linda would take turns sitting with him, holding his small hand, reassuring him that he was safe, that he was loved, and that this was his home for as long as he wanted it to be. Months passed, and the changes in Sam became more visible. He started to laugh, a sound that filled the once silent home with life again. He began to open up, sharing bits and pieces of his memories with John and Linda. He told them about the storm that had taken everything, but also about the little things he remembered from before, his favorite toy car, his mother's lullabies, and the way his father would toss him into the air and catch him. For John and Linda, every moment with Sam was a gift. They found healing in his laughter, purpose in his needs, and joy in his growth. Linda loved packing his lunch for school, slipping in handwritten notes that said, "You're doing amazing, Sam," or "We're so proud of you." John, who had once dreaded walking past the empty swings in the park, now delighted in pushing Sam on them, hearing his squeals of joy as he soared higher and higher. At school, Sam began to thrive. Once a timid child who barely spoke, he quickly became known for his curiosity and kindness. He loved drawing pictures, often of houses with big windows and smiling people inside. His teacher remarked to John and Linda one day, "Sam has a big heart. He's always looking out for the other kids, especially the ones who seem lonely." Sam even made friends, something he had never thought possible during those dark days when he felt like the world had forgotten him. He'd come home from school eager to share stories about his classmates, showing off drawings they had made together or the games they had played at recess. What stood out the most was the light in his eyes, a light that had been missing when John and Linda first met him. It was a light of trust, of hope, of a boy who was beginning to believe in the goodness of life again. Sam had gone from being a child who had lost everything to one who was discovering the boundless possibilities of the future. And in giving Sam a home, John and Linda found something they hadn't dared to hope for, a reason to smile again, a way to turn their grief into love. Their family, though born out of tragedy, became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of second chances. The days of loss and cold, spent huddled in the corners of a crowded shelter, are now only distant memories for Sam. Yet, the question he asked during those dark times continues to resonate in the hearts of millions. Does heaven have a place for me? It wasn't just the cry of a scared and lonely child. It was a profound plea, a question that underscored the responsibility we all share to create a kind of heaven here on earth. A place where no child feels forgotten, no family is left broken, and no one faces the world alone. Sam's story could have ended in tragedy, but instead, it became a testament to the boundless potential of human compassion. The boy who once wandered through the wreckage of his life, searching for answers, has now become a symbol of hope and resilience. His journey didn't just save his life. It became a spark that ignited a movement, inspiring others to stand up and take action. Now, years later, Sam stands on a brightly lit stage at a ceremony organized by the A Place for Me campaign. The hall is filled with people, volunteers, donors, families, and survivors, all of whom have been touched in some way by the initiative. Among the crowd are children, just like Sam once was, whose lives have been transformed through the campaign's work. dressed in a sharp suit, his smile radiant. Sam steps up to the microphone. For a moment, he looks out at the audience, his bright eyes scanning the sea of faces. Many are familiar, volunteers who once hammered nails into the walls of his new home, his school teachers, and, of course, his adoptive parents, John and Linda, who sit proudly in the front row. Taking a deep breath, Sam begins to speak. His voice is steady yet filled with emotion. A boy's gratitude shaped into words that carry the weight of his journey. When I was little, he starts, I thought heaven was this faraway place, up in the clouds, meant only for people who leave this world. Back then, I didn't think I had a place in it, here or there. But now, I know better. Heaven isn't some distant dream. It's something we can create, right here, with the love and kindness we show each other. The room falls silent, hanging on every word. I didn't understand that back then. Sam continues, his voice growing stronger. But the people in this room, you all showed me what heaven looks like. It's in the hands of volunteers who built our home. It's in the smiles of my new parents, who never gave up on me. It's in the warmth of my friends, who remind me every day that I belong. Heaven is here, in all of us, when we choose to help each other. As his words echo through the hall, there isn't a dry eye in the audience. For many, it's a poignant reminder of why they joined the campaign in the first place. Sam's transformation from a lost, frightened boy into a confident, hopeful young man is living proof of what can happen when compassion meets action. But Sam's story doesn't stop with him. His voice and presence have become a catalyst for change, a driving force that compels others to step forward and make a difference. Since the inception of the A Place for Me campaign, thousands of children like Sam have found homes, families, and futures they never thought possible. The centers built by the initiative have become sanctuaries, offering more than just shelter. They provide mentorship, education, and a path to healing for children who once believed they had no place in the world. For Sam, life has become a tapestry of second chances. His days are filled with laughter, school, and dreams of the future. He loves art and spends hours sketching scenes of nature, often saying that drawing helps him feel at peace. He also plays soccer with his friends, his boundless energy a stark contrast to the quiet, withdrawn child he once was. At home, he treasures family dinners with John and Linda, where they talk about everything from his favorite books to his latest adventures at school. What makes Sam's story so extraordinary isn't just how much he is healed, but how his journey continues to inspire others. Children look up to him as a role model, while adults see in him the power of what can be achieved when a community comes together with one shared purpose: to bring light into the lives of those who need it most. As the ceremony comes to a close, Sam steps off the stage to thunderous applause. Dozens of children run up to him, eager to hug the boy who has become their hero. He smiles down at them, his heart full of gratitude and hope. Sam knows that his story is just one among many, but he also understands its importance. It's a story that reminds the world that no matter how broken someone's beginning might seem, with love and support, their ending can be one of triumph. And as he stands surrounded by a sea of smiling faces, Sam realizes that he has found his place, not just in heaven, but here on earth, in the hearts of all who believed in him. Sam's story is more than an emotional reminder. It is a testament to the transformative power of action and love. From the depths of pain and loss, hope was rekindled, and through a simple promise, an extraordinary movement was born. His journey reminds us that even in the darkest moments, we all have the capacity to bring about change and create something beautiful. The boy who once asked, "Does heaven have a place for me?" is now living proof that heaven isn't a distant realm but something we build together. Through compassion, empathy, and kindness, lives can be rebuilt. futures can be secured, and hearts can be healed. What began as a campaign to provide shelter became so much more, a movement that inspires communities to take action and reminds us of our shared humanity. Sam's transformation teaches us that love, when expressed through purposeful action, can move mountains. His story is not just his own. It's a call to every person to recognize their ability to make a difference. Heaven is not out of reach. It's in every act of kindness, every moment of connection, and every step we take to uplift those in need. Let Sam's story awaken in you a heart full of empathy and a spirit ready to act. For it's not just Sam, but millions of others like him, who are waiting for the light only you can bring. Together, through compassion and love, we can create a world where no one is forgotten, and every child can believe in the hope of a brighter tomorrow.